from the book Africans and Native Americans by Jack Forbes. The reason I like his book mainly, not because of the information he writes in it, because of the sources which he puts here. And every chapter, almost every paragraph has a footnote, and you can go verify each source. It's all in his book. For example, down here in the bottom, you see I have it highlighted. It says, as early as the late 19th century, the 19th annual report of the Bureau of American Ethnology noted that a considerable proportion of the blood of the southern Negroes of the U.S. is unquestionably Indian. Unquestionably Indian. And I just wanted to show you this example here. As it says in this book here, it's actually journal or letters that were written to the Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution by J.W. Powell. He had a whole bunch of these volumes. They're called the Annual Report of the Bureau of American Ethnology. This is volume 19, or the 19th annual, as you see here, report. This comes in two parts. In part one of this, which was written in 1900, it says in some part of the book, it says, and I have the book, so I'm the one who made this image. So, in regards to the contact between the two races, by which such stories could be borrowed one by the other, it is not commonly known that in all the southern colonies, Indian slaves were bought and sold, and kept in servitude, and worked in the fields side by side with Negroes up to the time of Revolution. So they're saying there was Indians working in the fields, right, in all these plantations, all the way until 1776 at least. All right, so which one was the Indian and which one was the so-called black or Negro? Well, how can you tell them apart? How come? I mean, we've never seen any difference growing up, right? It's always showing us a so-called Negro as its name. All right. Continuing, it says, not to go back to the Spanish period when such things were the order of the day, and they're talking about how the Spanish and Portuguese was enslaving the American Indian by the thousands, We find the Cherokee as early as 1693 complaining that their people were being kidnapped by slave hunters. Hundreds of captured Tuscarora and nearly the whole tribe of the Apalachee were distributed as slaves among the Carolina colonists in the early part of the 18th century, while the Natchez and others shared a similar fate in Louisiana. We know the whole Natchez was chained up and sent to the Caribbean. We read that in Lies My Teacher Told Us. And as late as least of 1776, Cherokee prisoners of war were still sold to the highest bidder for the same purpose. At one time it was charged against the governor of South Carolina that he was provoking a general Indian war by his encouragement of slave hunts. Furthermore, as the coast tribes dwindled, they were compelled to associate and intermarry with the Negroes until they finally lost their identity. That's how they're describing it here, but it was always here, and were classed with that race. So they're saying the Indians became the Negro. That's what they're saying here. We're classed with that race, or classified together, so that a considerable proportion of the blood of the southern Negroes is unquestionably Indian. Again, so that a considerable proportion of the blood of the southern Negroes is unquestionably Indian. You are Indian. It's unquestionable. Annual report of the Bureau of American Ethnology to the Secretary of the Smithsonian Institute, volume 19. A considerable proportion of the blood of the southern Negro is unquestionably Indian. As you can see here, Ute Warrior, so-called Negro, Fernanda Lewis, MTV News, Creek, Blackfoot. So again, you see how we were able to back that up. Also, it says here, the 1937 doctoral dissertation of James Hugo Johnston, lately published many years later, went further. There developed in the colonial period much intermixture of the Indian and Negro slave, Negro, parentheses, that doesn't say African. The class commonly called the mulatto is the result in many instances of the union of three racial elements. To the visitor in the South, the physical characteristics of many Negro slaves bore witness to their Indian origin. All right, that's what Mr. James Hugo Johnston said in a 1937 doctoral dissertation. Then it says, the end of Indian slavery came with the final absorption of the blood of the Indian by the more numerous Negro slave. But the blood of the Indian did not become extinct in the slave states, for it continued to flow in the veins of the Negro. Again, but the blood of the Indian did not become extinct in the slave states, for it continued to flow in the veins of the Negro. It is you. It still is you. In an article published in the Journal of Negro History, Johnston remarked, where the Negro was brought into contact with the American Indian, the blood of the two races intermingled. The Indian has not disappeared from the land, but it is now part of the Negro population of the United States.